Spiritual healing is now so popular, it's even available on the NHS.
Some of them are seeing brilliant colours, bright lights, blinding light.
Anything living will be enhanced by this energy, even plants.
The claims are incredible.
Does healing really work? What's going on? Could science have stumbled across the answer?
That's when I was truly amazed. I went from being a skeptic to a believer. It's one of those incredible moments when you think, wow, this is really something.
We're in a football stadium on a Friday night in Norwich. Thousands of people are here. But they haven't come for a match. They've come for a miracle.
They're all saying that they want to have a changed life tonight. And this man coming through the tunnel is going to do that for them.
Everyone standing, sing with us and sing my soul, my Savior God to thee, how great thou art.
It's a healing service in the American tradition, and the man leading it is preacher Benny Hinn. At services like these, it's usual for people to report mass healings. I've come to see what will happen tonight.
Expecting mighty things? I am. How about you? Are you expecting mighty things tonight? Has Jesus changed? He healed every disease, every sickness. His word declares he's the same yesterday, today, forever. Meaning what he did 2,000 years ago, he'll do tonight in Norwich, England. And I'm here to tell the people of God, you have every legal right to receive healing because sickness is illegal in your body. My brother, my sister, the price is paid. The price is paid. The price is paid. All you got to do tonight is receive it.
I'm telling you, if you don't get healed, it's not my fault.
He's got a confrontational style which many find shocking. But tonight, all around me, people are just hoping for a cure.
And he cast out the spirits with his word and healed all that were sick. Say it, healed. Come on, healed all. Say it again, healed all. I pray, dear Jesus, every sickness will be healed. I pray every bondage will be broken.
I watched him pray and preach for about 2 hours. Then we were told that the healing was about to begin. Sure enough, it did.
A skin disease has just been healed. I rebuke it in Jesus' name. Somebody's lower back has been healed. I rebuke that pain in Jesus' name. Someone straight ahead from me has been healed of cancer.
This man came here tonight in a wheelchair.
Within minutes, more and more people started to come out of their seats. Their stories were astonishing.
Pastor, this lady had such great pain in her leg. She couldn't even run. She couldn't walk. Pastor, all the pain has left her.
Come on, let's completely go. Let's go. Come on.
It seemed a bit like showbiz to me. I'm a scientist, and everything in my training encourages me to ignore this kind of performance. But I'm stuck. The fact is, on the face of it, people who couldn't walk have just got out of their wheelchairs. tonight to you?
Oh, I am healed. I had severe pains. I couldn't walk. I came in a wheelchair.
Cry in morning with the pain, and sometimes you just scream.
And now?
Now I can run.
She can run, she can jump.
I can
no
jump.
more pain.
No more pain.
No more pain. And did it happen suddenly?
Yeah, at the beginning
At
of
the
the
beginning,
sermon.
from the beginning.
Hundreds of people here tonight believe they've been healed, and some of the examples were really quite dramatic. But if you don't believe in miracles, what was going on? If people really were made better, I have to know how. Spiritual healing is huge. And it isn't just the epic events happening in football stadia like Benny Hinn's. It's becoming mainstream. There are over 15,000 registered healers in the country. And I'm in a London hotel now, and I can just ring up on the phone and have a healer come as part of room service. You can even get it in some places on the NHS. So some people are convinced. But does it work? Is it curing anyone? And does it last? I'm going to find out. The first stage in my search for real evidence is to meet a man who had his own personal reason for finding out whether healing worked. People he knew were going to a healer and telling him how much better they felt. But it wasn't what he wanted to hear. He was a doctor, and these were his patients.
The first feeling is a sort of almost an anger at the patient and the healer, and saying, you know, this is balmy and really shouldn't be allowed, and why am I having to have this conversation which isn't logical? Here we are doing our best, using these fantastic new modern techniques, and someone comes along and manages to swipe your face and make the patient better, and not explicitly using anything, and certainly not anything that can be logically explained by medical science.
But Dr. Dixon couldn't ignore the good reports, and eventually started to encourage patients to try the healer. Chris Barr suffered from psoriasis.
It was very uncomfortable, and I had it for 6-7 years, I would have said, and all the conventional ointments, lotions, potions, whatever the doctor gave me just didn't seem to shift it.
Finally, he tried the spiritual healer.
I remember feeling a little bit sceptical about it. I'm not a great Christian, so the word spiritual did put me off a little bit, but not entirely. And I went along with an open mind in the end and gave it a go. To be honest, I did imagine maybe a little bit of chanting even. It sounds silly. And laying on of hands.
There was certainly an element of blind faith in all this. I mean, I felt that I was seeing improvements, but there was no research to prove that it worked. And so when patients said, you know, will it work, all I could say was, well, the patients that have seen the healer so far have been helped. And as far as I can see, it's entirely safe. That's all we could say.
Dr. Dixon then did something radical for a GP. He set up his own study to try to see whether healing was really working. So how did you set up the trial?
Well, what we did is we decided to have two groups, one group that had healing and one group that didn't. And we looked at the group that had healing over 6 months, and the group that didn't have healing were on the waiting list. So they were waiting, they were having standard treatment, but not actually having healing. So we could compare really the two groups, one that had the healing and one that didn't. And we made sure they were comparable in terms of how long they'd had the disease and the sort of diseases that they had.
Using more than 50 patients from around the community, the trial got underway. Chris's experience is typical of the sorts of reports that trickled in.
After 3 or 4 sessions, then it started to alleviate that, and you could actually see them get clearing up. And by the end of the 10 sessions, it was virtually gone completely.
The study wasn't as rigorous as a randomized control trial, but it was still a risk for a doctor to even be seen investigating healing.
I think I had sort of fears of being laughed at by my peers. I also had fears of coming unstuck and the whole thing ending up in disaster with patients complaining that it wasn't working or even worse.
Finally, it was crunch time. The results were through.
So what did you find in the trial?
Well, it was, in a way, almost astounding, because we found that 70% of patients got better, but 50% really quite significantly better as far as their main symptom was concerned.
So 70% got better compared with none really getting better in the control group?
Oh, no, about 30% got better in 20-30% in the control group, but there was a statistically significant difference.
Well, that's about 40%. That's a really good difference.
Exactly.
It was a surprising result and seemed to show that healing could work.
So people are getting better. Doctors don't know why, but the fact that they're getting better means doctors and patients are saying, yeah, we want this.
Exactly, exactly.
Dr. Dixon was so convinced that he now has 2 volunteer healers working in his practice. No one knows why healing seems to be working, but Teresa Seward has her theory.
I'm connecting to a form of energy that I feel comes from a higher source. You can tap into this energy, and anything living will be enhanced by this energy. I work with babies, children, adults, and all kinds of animals, even plants. It's just opening your mind to that concept that you can do that, and then you'll find that it does happen. So when I'm healing the animals, if they've got psychological problems, I will actually talk to them in my mind. At some level, you can communicate with all living things.
Hearing from the healer herself left me quite bewildered. She talked about energy and higher forces, a very different language from science, and yet the trials suggested faith healing can work.
It just doesn't make very much sense to me. But something is clearly happening for some people to feel better. But what?
I really need to know. Healing is now available on the NHS.
They call it the truth within, the life force, the transcendent part of us that is eternal and infinite.
We're in Cookridge Hospital in Leeds, and these are cancer patients.
So we are all connected to everything in the universe, and everything in the universe within us, within every cell of the body.
I didn't know what to expect. What I'm hearing is more like a religious service than the sounds I normally hear in a hospital.
And some of you may experience something quite wonderful in colours, in light. And
Ruth Kay has been employed for 2 years by the NHS. The patients she sees are referred to her by the hospital consultant.
So it's a screen.
I usually refer people and say that they need to see her for relaxation or sort of... I don't mention that she's a natural healer. That tends to put people off, and they don't really know what that is. It's hard to define. So it's usually people that are anxious, stressed, not coping in general. She does see it as a spiritual healing event.
Certainly, when Ruth spoke to me, it was clear that she thinks it involves some supernatural higher energy.
I call it the divine essence within me. And no one knows where the spirit or the soul resides within the body. It could be within every cell. And it could be also within the aura and the energy field, on which most healers work anyway.
Many of Ruth's patients were undergoing aggressive treatment for cancer and felt the healing was making a real difference.
Do you think that seeing Ruth helped you get better faster?
Oh, certainly. When I was in hospital, my recovery, or should I say the way that I coped with the treatment, which was very intense, seemed to be, I seemed to cope a lot better than the other patients that were on the ward that were going through the same, treatment as I was. In fact, I could only say that I sailed through it.
All I'm doing is sitting there, and it's happening for them. And all these patients are having an experience. Some of them are seeing brilliant colours, bright light, blinding light. and all I'm doing is walking past them and it's happening. I don't know, I'm not doing anything.
Ruth didn't mind not knowing why her patients were feeling better, but the consultant did.
It should matter that there is evidence, and we haven't really scrutinised it. Yes, it should matter, because we're so short of cash, and there's lots of other things that we need at Cookridge.
I thought about this and decided there's a real dilemma.
Ruth's patients seemed convinced that healing was helping them, and the consultants were recommending that patients go to see her, even though they really have no idea how or why it's working. Now, a part of me feels, how can you possibly argue with that? But another part of me feels, to justify healing being available on the NHS, you really need strong evidence that it's working. Why not just use other treatments that you know work?
I've seen that healing can make people better, but I still have no idea why. Healers feel there's an energy flow, but there's no proof that it exists. What I need to do now is to see what science makes of this, to know what can be said that goes beyond faith. To try and find out just what is happening, I've travelled thousands of miles west to the US.
When I've been talking to healers, it seems that the common thread is energy. It's either cosmic energy or their energy that's doing the healing. Now, if there is an energy, we ought to be able to measure it. And I've searched pretty hard and eventually found that there's some government-funded research into just this at the University of Arizona. So they've got money to do this. And when I say money, I mean quite a lot of it.
The US government has funded a research project worth almost $2 million. Scientists here at the university believe they can measure that special energy that healers claim can cure people, even plants. In the laboratories, they're running a range of experiments to identify this healing energy. I was intrigued to see what their experiments would show.
At this point, we're utilizing, for example, this GDV camera, which looks at electrical discharge and gas corona.
GDV meaning?
Gas discharge visualization. And so this GDV allows us to take a picture of the gas that's exhaled by the body and the electrical discharge.
Okay, now I understand that in our bodies we have lots of chemical reactions and we have electric currents going around in our nerves. You're saying that this machine somehow captures some of the information about chemical reactions as well as
electrical, and it's also looking at electromagnetic, low-frequency information.
So what happens when it's working? What will go on?
What we'll do is we'll have you put your finger on the glass through there, and we're going to send a millivolt charge across the glass. That's going to cause the gas, which is exhaling from your body as part of its normal body system. Your skin inhales and your skin exhales. And we're going to take that charge and scatter the gas so it makes a pattern.
Okay, slow down. So I put my finger on here. There's a voltage on here.
It's a millivolt.
So, and what's going to happen is almost as though a small electric current is going to jump between my finger and the glass. Is that?
It's going to slide right along the glass, and it's going to take the gas and scatter it and say, okay, what have we got here? So we get a picture, an array of what kind of gas there is coming out of the fingertip.
This wasn't making sense to me. We all produce gases, and we all have an electromagnetic field. But I couldn't see how passing a current through my finger could measure anything meaningful.
Now, whenever I've come across anything like this before, something to do with a charge leaping across a space, I've always understood that some of the things that make the biggest difference are the shape of the thing, you know, the shape of my finger,
as well as kind of environmental factors like moisture and things like that. Don't those things make
They do
more
make
of a difference?
They do make a difference. So when we're preparing someone, we actually make sure that, for example, if they've just washed their hands, we need to wait about 15 minutes before we take an image. And we ask people not to put heavy hand lotion on, because that could change the image.
I'm feeling pretty shell-shocked by all of that. I don't really know where to begin. There are so many problems, I think, with the science. I mean, I haven't seen a single bit of evidence to persuade me that what they're actually measuring is people's energy. You know, I've seen those kinds of photographs before, and I know that I could put anything into that machine and I'd get a pretty spangly pattern. You know, I could put a rock in there and there'd be a pattern produced. It doesn't mean that rocks produce energy. So it doesn't mean they're looking at people's energy.
But there was more. So you've had a chance to do the processing of the different images. What next?
This particular part of the software is called the aura portion. And what
Aura portion.
That's correct.
Now, you said aura. Mm-hmm. Are you saying that this pattern here around the body is an aura?
As they were developing the software, they also talked to local Russian healers who had the ability to see the field and used their information to help them in the way that they designed how the display was done.
So there is a component within the software that's taking the way that healers see auras or energy fields and then helps the program to map that onto this kind of image. That's what you're saying?
That's correct.
I was shocked that something as subjective as a healer's vision of an energy field was the basis of this computer program. I knew the centre was still experimenting, but it seemed they're not so much trying to find out the evidence for healing energy, but rather working on the basis that there is one. It's been quite bewildering being here, because I've sometimes felt, this isn't scientific. You know, you're basing your equipment on bits of science and then bits of meridians and then bits of healer interpretation of things, but calling it all science. And that kind of made me angry. It's true that we all have an electromagnetic field, but that isn't what the centre was measuring. And even if they were, they'd still have to prove that it's got anything to do with healing. Arizona has not given me evidence of a healing energy, but I still need to know why healing can make people feel better. I think I'm on the verge of finding out. Some groundbreaking news is waiting for me just across the Atlantic. I've just heard of a rather unusual experiment that's taken place in Aberdeen in Scotland. It involves a psychologist, a healer, a cast of 80 local volunteers, and a bit of dressing up. Dr. Clayland's plan was to test not only whether faith healing worked, but if it did, why. She devised many health trials before, but this was going to be different.
For spiritual healing, it's a bit more difficult. It's not a drug. How can you disguise whether somebody's getting spiritual healing or not? And we hit on the idea of having the spiritual healer delivering spiritual healing, obviously, then an actor copying his lines and motions.
Patients would see either the real healer or the fake, but the sham healer would have to be completely convincing. Dr. Clayland had someone in mind.
I knew it would interest him. He would find it intuitively quite an interesting job. And when we phoned him about it, his first reaction was disbelief, I think.
I had no idea what it was all about. And I had not said yes. I just said, I'll come for a chat. And when we spoke about it, and we obviously were going to get on fine together, I thought, I can do this. I'll give it a whirl.
The volunteers were chronic asthma patients.
Any form of exercise would bring on wheezing and coughing. Colds went to my chest. Generally just wheezing. Laughing made me wheeze. Wine drinking made me wheeze.
My symptoms were quite sudden and quite intense, often triggered by colds and also by going on aeroplanes, and it can lead on to quite bad chest infections.
The patients understood that they wouldn't know whether they were seeing a genuine healer or the sham. And for Julie, this felt a bit weird.
I found it all very strange, thinking that I might be receiving treatment that I might be thinking was healing me, when in actual fact somebody was just going through the motions of pretending to heal me.
Peter was just keen to try any new treatment.
I was quite interested in taking part. I don't particularly like to take any medication continuously, so anything that gave me a possibility of doing without medication was interesting.
Bob, meanwhile, had to concentrate on becoming an exact replica of the real healer.
We were both called Fred. I wore black trousers, as did he. Black shoes, as did he. Shirt with the sleeves rolled up, blue shirts normally, and a tie. We did this right from the word go and kept it all the way through. So that anyone who saw Fred saw virtually the same person.
What's more, every word and movement had to be identical. Bob practiced hard.
When I got my first person, it was a bit hairy, because I really was determined to get this and do it properly, because it was a scientific research thing, and I didn't want to be the one to let it go wrong.
Peter was one of Bob's patients.
Looked like a businessman, really. Music was playing, and it was amazingly relaxing.
So far, Bob seemed to be convincing. Julie, in fact, saw the real healer, but wondered whether he was a fake.
I enjoyed the tranquility, and although his voice was strangely false to me, I found it very comforting.
After weeks of following strict procedures, the results were analysed. Could sham healing possibly be as good as the real thing?
At the end of the 5 weeks, we analysed the data and found that the patients that had received spiritual healing had indeed improved from baseline, but so had the patients that had been seeing the actor. And in fact, there was no statistically significant difference between groups, although there was a trend in the data for those who had seen the actor and received sham healing to have improved slightly more, which was quite surprising.
So a pretend healer could do just as well as a real one. Indeed, Bob's fake healing was so good that Peter finds it hard to believe that he saw the sham.
I felt that it was too real to have been an actor, that it had to be somebody who had some ability to affect the patients.
Our results indicate that time spent with a spiritual healer does not provide you with any different outcome from time spent with an actor pretending to be a spiritual healer, which suggests that there is nothing inherently special to do with spiritual healing. There is no good that is coming from the spiritual healing in itself.
So, sham healing can be just as good as the real thing. These are fascinating results, and what's more, confirm other healing trials.
The Aberdeen experiment is extraordinary. It means that people weren't getting better because of anything special about the healer's treatment. They were getting better just because they thought they would. So people were being healed just by believing they would be. Now, in science, we call this the placebo effect, and it's often dismissed. But I think we might be missing a trick here. Placebo could explain some of the astonishing things that I've been seeing.
The idea of the placebo has set me off on the next stage of my journey. As a scientist, I'm familiar with the term, but I think it's much more significant than I'd ever realised.
It's quite an amazing idea that real changes can happen in the body just because you think they're going to happen. So So it's something I need to explore some more. I've come to meet a man who can help me. Professor Irving Kirsch devised his own experiment to see whether merely believing you're having something could have the same effect as actually having it. He showed that this could significantly affect people's coordination skills. So how did you design this experiment that was going to show that what people believed could affect their bodies?
Well, the first thing we wanted to find is something that happens in everyday life. And one of the things that people do is they drink coffee and tea that has caffeine in it. People report all kinds of effects. They get jittery, they are able to concentrate better, they become more alert. And some of these effects are clearly effects of caffeine, but I wondered perhaps some of them are also effects of thinking that you've taken caffeine, thinking that you've had a caffeinated beverage. So what would happen to people's ability to respond quickly, to concentrate, if we gave them decaffeinated coffee without them being aware of it?
The idea was to test whether decaffeinated coffee would have the same effect on people's coordination as real caffeine. Their performance would be assessed before and after they'd been given the caffeine-free drink.
So when a volunteer turned up to do the trial, what would they experience?
First thing that we did was to give people some tests of cognitive abilities and motor skills.
And then what?
We asked people then what they thought would happen to their ability to do these tests.
So it's kind of looking at their expectation of what the coffee's going to do.
That's exactly what it is.
It was then time to bring on what looked like coffee and to make sure no one could tell the difference.
We went through the whole ritual of brewing the coffee. We had a recognized brand of regular coffee, although what was really in it that they didn't know was decaffeinated coffee, placebo coffee, if you will. We had just emptied out the bag of coffee and put in decaffeinated coffee.
And presumably you'd use coffee with a great aroma, so it was completely convincing. That's really what they were getting.
It was very important to be completely convincing. We brewed the coffee, poured them a cup, had them drink it. Then we waited for a period of time, about 15 minutes, to let the coffee go through their system, let the caffeine, which didn't exist, take effect. And then we remeasured their performance on these various tasks.
The activities tested the volunteers' coordination.
It included the ability to concentrate and remember strings of numbers, to follow with their hand a moving target, the ability to react very quickly when a particular stimulus would be shown.
So a kind of a concentration test, an accuracy test, and a speed test.
That's right.
But would it work? Would drinking something with absolutely no caffeine really have the same effect as drinking the real thing? The answer was yes.
In more technical terms, there was a correlation, a significant correlation, between what people believed the effects of coffee would be and what the effects of unknowingly decaffeinated coffee was on their behavior.
So just believing that something's going to make you better can make you better, regardless of whether you actually have any of the thing.
That's exactly what our data suggests.
The evidence was certainly there, and I couldn't argue with it. This experiment confirms that if you're told that something will happen, and you really believe it will, that can bring about changes in the body. And it seems to work for an everyday example, like caffeine, but also for a long-term chronic condition like asthma. But what about something more dramatic? Here in Texas, I think I'm going to get the evidence I'm after. Proof of the huge power of the placebo.
Houston seems to me like a pretty ordinary American city with its cluster of shiny high-rises. But something extraordinary has happened here. And if you thought you knew anything about healing, I think you're in for a shock.
The idea was to treat people in great pain. Volunteers with severe knee arthritis were gathered from around the state and divided into groups. 2 groups would have a surgical procedure. The third would be given a placebo, fake surgery. They'd have a general anaesthetic, be opened up, but wouldn't have any real procedure. They would merely think they had. I had to meet the surgeon.
It's very important for the patients not to know which treatment that they have. And they're always trying to look for clues. You know, they're always trying to get you to tell them. And the best way to avoid that, of course, is to not know as a doctor until the last minute which treatment they're going to have.
Each patient would receive a general anaesthetic, but only 2 groups would have an actual procedure. Not even the surgical staff knew who was in each group until they were in the theatre.
I would open the envelope in the room and I would read it, but I wouldn't announce it out loud. And then I would show it to the nurses who were working with me, and I would show it to the anesthesiologist, and nobody would ever say which of the 3 treatments was revealed in the envelope. We had a very elaborate ruse, if you will. I would play a videotape on the TV of a real surgery. And while I was watching the TV, I would ask for instruments and pass things back and forth and carry on conversation as if it was what I would really have done if what was happening on the TV screen was actually going on during that surgery. So we would have water splashing, we would have instruments clanking, and we would do this for the same amount of time that the actual surgery on the videotape took place, so that a patient and their family couldn't watch the clock and say, oh, we were only in the operating room for 10 minutes, so it must have been a pretend surgery.
All this acting felt a bit weird to a doctor trained in standard surgical procedures.
In the big picture, always in the back of my mind, I was thinking, good gosh, here's a patient who we're pretending to do surgery on. We're not really doing surgery, and you know, I'm a physician and a healer after all, and is this kind of really, you know, the right thing to do? Or what have I gotten myself into?
It took 2 years for the study to be completed. Finally, it was time for Dr. Moseley to hear the truth from the patients themselves.
I would say, if you think that the surgery helped your knee, I want you to give me a thumbs up. If you think the surgery didn't help your knee, I want you to give me a thumbs down. And if you're not sure or you're kind of neutral, just hold your hand flat. Twist your knee
the verdict? Success for every group, fake or genuine. Sham surgery had worked. The patients who had it were astonished.
The response ranged from, "You've got to be kidding me, I can't believe it," bewilderment, "There must be a mistake," because they all felt so strongly that something had happened to change what was going on inside their knee.
During your training, what were you taught about the placebo effect?
Nothing. I had no clue. I went from being a skeptic to a believer. I realized that we were really onto something. There are clearly cases where we do surgeries and it's as much or more the patient's feeling about the surgery that influences the result as the actual surgery itself.
Dr. Moseley had seen patients get better purely because of what was in their minds. The pain had gone. It seemed too good to be true, and it did all happen 7 years ago. I wanted to see one of the patients who'd been in great pain before having Dr. Moseley's surgery. I wanted to know whether the placebo effect could still hold.
When I first had that pain, before that, I couldn't do a lot of things I did, like going fishing or playing basketball or going dancing. And after that, I was able to do that.
He could. Woo! We could go dancing. He took me dancing, and he could dance all night.
Can you describe what the pain was like before the operation?
Terrible, awful. I didn't think that it could be any worse.
It's emotional. Why is Is it because you were in so much pain before?
Yes.
And what would you say it was that really cured you? Was it Dr. Mosley, or was it you and your mind?
That is kind of a intriguing question, you know, because I got to credit Dr. Mosley for doing what he did. But it was my mind that cured the problem.
I knew that Dr. Mosley's patients had been cured by the sham operation, but I wasn't expecting it to have changed his life. I mean, he couldn't talk about the pain that he'd experienced without crying. It was more profound than I expected.
Dr. Mosley's work is dynamite, and he's not the only surgeon doing it. I found examples of successful sham surgery for a range of heart conditions. The power of the placebo is breathtaking. But what I want to know is, how does it work? And could it be the answer to what's going on in spiritual healing? I wonder, what's the physiological basis of the placebo? My search to understand the placebo has brought me to Vancouver. I found out that something truly remarkable happened here that might just give a glimpse into what seems mysterious. Up until now, our evidence for the power of the placebo has relied on the patient's own reports.
We've been talking about pain, and pain is really subjective. It's hard to measure. So what we really need is an experiment with something tangible, something measurable that you can repeat again and again.
The story starts right here in the centre of Vancouver with a local artist, Richard Summers. Richard has Parkinson's disease. Patients can't produce enough dopamine in their brains and take medication to help generate it.
In my case, the symptoms are mostly bradykinesia, which is slow movement, stiffness, and loss of balance. There are side effects that come into play, and as time goes by and you increase the dosages, the side effects become worse, and you have to strike a balance between the side effects and the effectiveness of the medication.
Richard had volunteered for a study designed to look at how his brain responded to medication. Like the other patients, Richard would be given both active medication and a placebo so that a comparison could be made between the two. This was standard. But in this trial, something surprising was going to happen. The patients themselves had been divided into two groups. One was given absolutely no treatment, and the other an injection of saline. This saline injection should have no effect at all.
You wouldn't anticipate that injecting saline would have any impact whatsoever on the results of the scan, but there was a significant difference between injecting saline and doing nothing.
At first, this confused Dr. Stozel, until he realized that something extraordinary was happening.
Saline itself should not have an impact on the scan, so our interpretation was that the injection of saline resulted in a placebo effect, and that, in fact, what we were measuring was the people's brains releasing their own dopamine.
In other words, those who had saline were actually reacting as if they'd been given medication. Their brains were producing dopamine. The only explanation was that the patient's belief that they'd been given the drug had made their brains react as if they had.
Certainly an enormous surprise and excitement to us, because we were initially, in fact, baffled by this problem. Of course, we both realized how enormous the implications were, that we had, identified a mechanism for the placebo effect, but we had to confirm the findings.
The placebo injection of saline had made their brains produce a significant amount of dopamine. But Dr. Stozel had to confirm the findings, and that meant repeating the process without anyone else knowing why.
We had to keep the whole thing to ourselves. So there was a period of time where the only two people who knew about this were the two of us, and we had to bring people back to do scans without letting anybody else know what was going on.
We knew something of what was going on. We knew what the procedures were going to be in general, and you could probably read a bit between the lines, but we didn't really know that, or at least I didn't really know that it was a test for placebo effects.
The initial findings had been confirmed. The placebo group had indeed produced dopamine. Without giving them any kind of treatment, you've now helped them to create their own dopamine.
Well, we did give them treatment. We gave them a placebo. And so that is the remarkable aspect of it.
The placebo was particularly powerful in the case of Richard.
I was kind of amazed, really, to find that the placebo could be that effective. I didn't expect it to be better than the strongest dose. And it came as a big surprise to me. You always believe these things won't work on you, but they do.
Dr. Stoessel now thinks he understands the mechanism. Parts of the brain that produce dopamine are associated with expectation and reward. If you expect something good, like treatment, these dopamine networks will be triggered.
It would appear that when an animal expects a reward, it may release dopamine, or the dopamine-producing cells become active even prior to the reward.
But Dr. Stoessel thinks his findings may go beyond Parkinson's. He believes dopamine could be central to the placebo effect in all of us because of its connection to expectation. We all release dopamine when we expect something good. And that means the placebo mechanism that appears to work in Parkinson's may actually trigger the placebo response in us all. So you're saying that dopamine is a key brain chemical in the way that we all work when it comes to rewards, so food, cigarettes, sex, anything like that. And it happens to be the chemical that is reduced in Parkinson's disease. So although what you were observing was just in one disease, the implications are presumably much bigger.
We think they are. We were, of course, lucky that we were looking at a disease where dopamine plays a critical role.
We think that the expectation of benefit is critical to the placebo effect, no matter what's wrong.
And then once the expectation is there, the brain may activate other machinery that may be more specific to the particular disease.
So dopamine might be something involved in all kinds of placebo. And then further down, whether it's your knee getting better, pain getting better, or depression getting better, there are appropriate responses in the body.
That's exactly right. We've speculated that, but we have not had the opportunity to prove it yet.
It seems amazing that expectation can play such a key role in our health and healing. But it does. The placebo effect, just our belief that a treatment will help, means it really can help. And knowing this has helped Richard.
The mind has a great deal of control over your body, and you can kind of force yourself into thinking about improving the situation. I've got the ability to control my spasms, which some people don't do, and I can, by concentrating very hard on it, I can just kind of relax my body, and it goes away. It takes a real concentration, and as soon as you lose your concentration, the stiffness and rigidity comes back, but you can control it to a certain extent with your mind.
There's been a lot of controversy over the placebo effect, and some people have even argued that it doesn't exist, and some people have talked about this being something in your mind or in your imagination. But this shows that although it may be something that happens in the mind, there is actually a physiological underpinning. There is a biochemical explanation, at least in the case of Parkinson's disease, and quite likely in the case of other conditions as well.
What John's experiments have shown is that the way that you're thinking and what you expect actually produce real changes within the brain. And we may have always used the term mind over matter. This is really proving it.
my journey so far has proved the enormous power of the placebo. But different treatments will have different placebo potential. I need to know, what is it that makes a particular placebo powerful, and see if this is what's behind spiritual healing. I found an anthropologist who's analysed this and built up a body of evidence. He's looked at what maximises our expectation, starting with pills.
In one study that I did, I was able to show that patients who took 4 placebo tablets a day did better than patients who took 2 placebo tablets a day. Now, you know, I mean, 4 times nothing is nothing, and 2 times nothing is nothing. But at the same time, any 3-year-old knows that 4 is more than 2. And so this is not particularly obscure. There it is. And there's good scientific evidence to support this. Likewise, the fact of color makes a difference. Different colored pills have different effects on us.
Dr. Moorman also found that ritual has a powerful effect on us, and so the process of sham surgery will be potent.
The fact that you know it's going to be surgery makes it a big deal. I mean, there's knives here. There are half a dozen people standing around. There's an anesthetist. There's this extraordinary stuff going on with massive technology, and you're hooked up to all kinds of machines that are beeping and snarling at you. It's probably one of the peak experiences of many people's lives. This can't go unnoticed.
But of all the elements that maximise a placebo, Dr. Moorman has established that one factor is key: the role of the healer.
However complex this process is, and it's very, very complicated, there's simply no doubt there's enormous amounts of evidence to show that the most important single thing is the enthusiasm, the commitment, the belief of the practitioner. It doesn't matter what kind of a practitioner it is, whether it's a surgeon or an internist or an anesthesiologist or a massage therapist or a chiropractor. It's their commitment to what they're doing that is conveyed in the most compelling and sometimes very subtle ways to patients that makes a huge difference.
I'm taking these thoughts home with me and applying them to spiritual healings. The last question for me is whether the placebo effect can explain the most powerful example of healing that I've seen. That night with Benny Hinn. I remember people telling me that they were transformed. Ever since then, I've been searching for a scientific explanation of how that could have happened. And I'm now convinced that it is indeed the placebo. It seems that event had every necessary element. It certainly had huge ritual and expectation. The whole thing is just such a carefully choreographed performance. The music, the lights, the singing, and the stage has been completely prepared beforehand.
My Savior God, to thee, how great thou art!
There was such a huge feeling of expectation. There was this emotional build-up, and people were, being built up to believe that something was going to change in them, to really hope that something was going to change. It was massive. And then finally this man comes on stage in a white suit with just superb confidence. It's the healer. His role is crucial, and he dominates the stage. Such, at first, calm and building up. He's completely determined, it seems.
Has Jesus changed? What he did 2,000 years ago, he'll do tonight in Norwich, England. My brother, my sister, the price is paid. The price is paid. The price is paid. All you're going to do tonight is receive it.
It was quite an extraordinary performance. You could feel the emotion in the air.
You have every legal right to receive healing because sickness is illegal in your body.
telling you, if you don't get healed, it's not my fault.
He was almost ordering people to get better, almost instilling fear, really manipulating people's feelings.
Ladies, I said nobody's allowed to move right now. Nobody's allowed to move.
I found some of it personally quite troubling. But for the people in that room, you know, if you believe in what he believes in, that's going to have an amazing effect.
Arthritis has just been healed. Just there in front of me, to my left, I rebuke that arthritis.
So does that mean that healing works? Well, I found no evidence of any healing energy, whatever the healers say. Healing doesn't seem to work beyond placebo. And however powerful the placebo effect may be, you don't have to be a spiritual healer to make it work. Any practitioner can bring out the healing power of the placebo, but they need the time to do it.
I feel worried that we're perhaps losing our role as healers in general practice today. If you come in to see me, I'll often be watching that screen, and many of the time I've turned around 4 minutes later and said, my goodness me, you're looking ill, and I hadn't even noticed. The healing is the interaction between the two of us, is the understanding, is some of the talking, sometimes simple things like even taking blood pressure or taking a pulse can be an act of healing. I see the placebo effect, which is something to do with relationships, as being the self-healing effect.
I want to take you down one last part of this journey. It's quite a personal thing for me, but I think it really shows, you know, it sums up what for me are some of the most important things that I've learned when I've been making this film. I've spent a lot of time in this hospital ward with my dad. He's been sick over the last 6 months. And over all that time, as he's gradually got worse each week, more crippled, it's just gently been breaking my heart. And I guess we've all spent time losing hope. And really, you know, he's been relentlessly optimistic all his life, but he just lost the will to live. Now that's all changed because of one man, really, because of the doctor, the healer. We still don't know whether Dad is going to recover. But the role of the doctor, the healer, has just been so key. You know, it's given Dad back some hope. With this guy's confidence, with him giving some kind of expectation that Dad can get better, Dad now believes that maybe he can. We know the healer is the most important part of the placebo. We know that all practitioners have the ability to exploit the placebo, and we now know how powerful this effect can be. I want to see that power properly harnessed in all areas of health. We are mad not to.
Julian Clary plays detective and tracks down his past in Who Do You Think You Are tomorrow night at 9 here on BBC Two. Next up, past headlines with current comedy. Andrew Marr hosts Have I Got Old News for You?